Welcome to episode 7 of Mr. Haden's Ag Classroom. Today we are going to talk about plants, specifically structure, and our knowledge of classification. I am your host, Mr. Haden, as always, and welcome you to this Tuesday. I hope you're getting through this quarantine time in your home and that you haven't killed any family members yet. And like I said, today we'll be talking about plants, specifically some of their structure items, how they're named, and some classification. Now, to start out with classification of plants, what that means is just categorizing plants by their physical characteristics, okay? Unlike your mom, who might just call you lazy because you're in the basement for most of this time period. But Carl Linnaeus is the grandfather of all plant classification systems. He came up with the dichotomous key, which is a two-way naming system for all plants based on their physical characteristics. And Carl actually called me the other day to get him some groceries because he hadn't botany. And botany is actually the science of classifying plants and giving them names. There are over 400,000 different plant species that have been identified by humans and thousands more that have not yet been discovered. So when we talk about plants, we're talking about a wide array of plants, some as tall as the giant redwoods in California, over 300 feet tall, and some of the tiniest plants that are super hard to see with the eye. That is our first Stump Pump sponsor of the day. We have Walmart, running small businesses out of business since 1962. Visit them for all your plant needs. And so after that, we are going to talk briefly about the classification system, a little bit, the monocot and dicot, okay? All plants can be broken into either a monocot or dicot plant. What that means is a monocot plant has these three characteristics. One seed leaf. So when the plant germinates, they only have one leaf that pops out of the ground. Whereas a dicot plant has two seed leaves. Right here, an example of a lot of your dicot plants would be a watermelon, tomato, pepper. Most trees are dicots. A lot of your monocots will be grasses. So anything that you have like in your yard that's growing as a grass, the bamboo plant would also be another example of that. They also have a monocot plant has parallel leaf veins. So whenever you go out on a walk in this time of quarantine, why don't you look at a plant leaf and tell me, hey, is that a monocot or dicot? A monocot plant will have parallel leaf veins. There's some cross-curricular information for you, math department. All right, and then you have the netted veins, which if you look at your palm, a lot like our blood vessels, where they're not parallel, they're crisscrossing, they're going all over. And then finally, the fibrous root versus the taproot. A fibrous root is going to have a bunch of tiny little roots in the top 6 to 12 inches of the soil. If you think about like a corn stalk and how hard it is to pull it out of the soil, that's because it has a lot of fibrous roots and actually contractile roots also that help keep that corn plant in the ground. But when we're talking about a dicot plant, it has a taproot. One main root that goes down into the soil. It doesn't have to go very super deep down in the soil, but an example of dicots would be almost all your tree species. So when you think about the next time you have a big tornado that goes through your neighborhood, you can look and see the uprooted trees. They pull all the soil with them because those roots are they're stuck in there so good, okay? Now, one group of plant that we didn't talk about that should have been in our gardening is we're going to talk about herbs, and they're kind of a big deal. And herbs are used to like spice up a lot of different food dishes that we have, and you can grind up and dry those leaves and make things nice and tasty. A lot of those would be part of the dicot family, okay? And so that's a basic breakdown of monocot and dicot there. Now, when we think about a plant, this is my poor drawing of a corn seed. Everyone always asks me, Mr. Haden, does a root develop first or a stem develop first when the seed first starts germinating? Germinating is just a fancy word for the process of the seed coat breaking apart and letting the root develop first. So I kind of gave away the answer there, but the root has to go first because, as we'll learn in our next section, the job of the root is to anchor the plant, but also to absorb valuable nutrients and water. So the root will actually break through the seed coat, and what's required there is moisture. The seed coat helps keep the plant seed dormant. Some seeds can remain dormant in the ground for 50 to 100 years until the time is right in terms of environment. Warm weather, moisture, and an adequate amount of sunlight, okay? So this corn plant is going to produce this root. It's going to get in the soil, and then from there, the stem will pop out from there, okay? And then if you have a cut, you can say to your friend, I kind of butchered that one, but it was supposed to be about aloe vera, how it heals cuts, but now it's just general knowledge for you. But if we go over here to our leaf and our stem and our roots, the main job of the roots is to absorb water and nutrients, like we said. Now, a root itself is kind of like a tube, but what makes it really good, like a sponge, is the presence of root hairs. These tiny little hairs that are very, very, very small, but you can see them with your own eyes, they make the tube into more of a sponge so it can absorb water and nutrients in a higher efficiency. Then we go to the stem. The main job of the stem is to transport water and sugar up and down the stem, as well as the nutrients, and to provide structure for the plant. The job of the stem is very important. If a plant gets cut off in the stem, lots of times it dies completely. Sometimes it can grow back. And then finally, you have the leaf, which a lot of people think in the summertime, hey, when I water my garden and I spray water on my garden, it looks like the leaves have a bunch of water droplets on it. They have to be absorbing those, right? Well, not exactly. The main job of the leaf is to collect sunlight, as we know, for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process of taking in CO2, and we also have our sunlight, and we have our water, and then converting it into sugar and oxygen, that the plant uses as sugar and gives us oxygen through these tiny little holes in the bottom part of the leaf called stomata, okay? Like you guys like to say at home, right? Tomato or potato, same word, right? All right, and so what we're looking for there is the leaves are a very important part, and they actually have a backup power source. Like if an insect or windstorm knocks over the leaf, there's actually a backup bud there that can grow, okay? So far I've done a really bad job with the jokes today, so I'm just going to refer to my note sheet here, because trust me on this one, you're going to need a leaf of faith to help me out with these next jokes, all right? And then what do you call a nervous tree? A sweaty palm. And then let's get to the rest of the root of this knowledge by examining the specimens I have here. I have 3 different plants here. 2 of them are fake. I'll give you 10 seconds to identify which ones are fake. This is a fake plant, and so is this one. These are both examples of fake succulents. That's our sump up number 2. We're talking about Steve's Custom Carpentry. They measure twice and cut once to make sure they do a great job. But back to these succulents. Succulents are a plant that don't need a lot of water. They can live very easily in the desert. They have thick, waxy leaves. These ones are especially waxy because they're made of plastic. But these plants right here, they have a taproot system. They don't lose water very easily. And then there's another thing that I wanted to talk about. These are actually live sunflower plants right here. And if you've noticed, they're both leaning one way. And they're not leaning by accident. They've been upstairs in my kitchen window. The kids have been growing these. They're leaning because they're trying to go towards the source of light. And that term that we're going to talk about there is called phototropism at the bottom one there. Phototropism is where literally when the plant senses light from one direction, it slows down the growth of these cells on the side that's facing the light, and it speeds up the growth of the stem on the opposite side, the part not facing the sun. So it literally starts bending itself to absorb more sunlight. Now the problem is when we transplant these plants outside, they're not going to do very well because they are not used to wind. Their stem is extremely lanky. They probably will not survive, but they would make a good example. You can see the cotyledons down here in the bottom. It's a dicot plant. Eventually these will dry up and fall off, but it is something fun to do, and you can easily see the leaf veins. So if you have a microscope at home, do some own learning on your own. You can definitely dissect the leaf and look at some different parts there, okay? The sunflower plant, it will also have a taproot because we talked about it being a dicot, right? And so that gives you some brief information on leaves. I hope you enjoyed it and you're starting to think about the spring. One other fun thing I saw on a blog the other day is you can literally cut your pepper top. This is the middle part of the pepper that has all the seeds. You can bury this whole thing in the soil about 2 inches, maybe 1 inch to 2 inches deep, and then this thing will just explode into hundreds of pepper plants that are germinating. Kind of a fun experiment if you have kids at home, just to see them that this is what it looks like. Now it might take 8 to 10 days to get those seeds to germinate, but if you have some source of soil, a great experiment to do at home with your kids. So thank you for watching episode 7. We'll be back tomorrow with episode number 8.